So y'all know that Greek life and Christianity has been one of my favorite go-to topics on the channel in recent years. It's a very controversial subject. Plenty of people have been debating whether or not Christians should be a part of Black Greek organizations for many years now. And if you've been watching me for a while, you already know my opinion on that is that Christians should stay far, far away from these organizations for all the reasons that I've mentioned in previous videos. But in this video, we're going to talk about a story that I recently ran across where it was talking about an AKA and a Delta that decided to get married. And here's my theory, guys. I personally believe that the LGBTQ plus movement is ultimately going to bring down these Black Greek lettered organizations, but we'll get into that here shortly. First, I just want to show a clip of the wedding ceremony and then read an article that talks about it in more detail.
Take your time. You got plenty of time. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right, so it's a very short clip, and this is the part of the video that I wish I didn't even have to say this, but if you are writing something really nasty right now in my comment section about these two women, please don't do that. That's not what this video is about. These are our fellow image bearers, okay? God loves these women. They represent probably some of your sisters, co-workers, friends, family members, all these different things. So if we as Christians want to effectively reach the LGBTQ plus community, we have to remember that God loves them. We have to love them. And that means we can love them enough to share the truth. But sharing the truth doesn't mean that you have to be nasty to people. So I said all that to say, I think the video footage shows that these are people who really have strong feelings for one another. And I don't think that we should just dismiss or downplay that, because our feelings are very strong, whether you're desiring something that's good or desiring something that's not ultimately good and not ultimately for your well-being. So I found an article where it kind of talks about these women and their story of how they got together. Okay, so this says, from sorority life to married life, a Delta and AKA wedding to remember. This is by Brianna Alford Jones and Marielle Turner. Okay, it says, love is in the air, and this wedding season, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Alpha Chapter and a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Alpha Chapter showed up and showed out at their wedding ceremony. So both of these women are a part of AKA and Delta and like the Alpha Chapter, which is the first chapters that were ever established. So that's some clout right there. Okay. All right. So anyway, it says Rachel Crouch, who was a Delta, and Kimberly Kim Burks, who was an AKA, tied the knot in a lavish ceremony that only members of the Divine Nine could have planned. Y'all already know Divine Nine. It's another name for the 9 Black Greek letter organizations. It says a somewhat serious rivalry has existed between the two sororities since some of the founders of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated left AKA sorority to form their own organization in 1913. Although there's some competition between AKs and Delta, it's all love rooted in sisterhood and service. Rachel and Kim's wedding is one of the most significant displays of that love, as two were joined as one. The pair are now officially Mrs. and Mrs. Burks Crouch, and they had a wedding full of dancing, laughter, and fun at Charcoal Factory, event venue in Chicago, with members of both orgs coming together to celebrate sisterly and romantic love. The couple are both graduates at Howard University and were friends in college, but their romance didn't begin until Kim, a Chicago native and educator, approached Rachel, a Washington, D.C. educator and artist who specializes in paint and luxury collegiate apparel, on her birthday 3 years ago. According to Kim, the couple had a 20-year crush. They've known each other for 20 years that blossomed into love unexpectedly. Over the years, it was like we knew we were interested in each other, the bride tells Black Love. All of our friends knew we were interested in each other, but neither one of us ever really pulled the trigger. Also, Rachel was always in a relationship, so we were always just friends. Kim says she kind of crashed Rachel's birthday party in 2021, calling Rachel ahead of time to let her know she was coming. The two connected during the celebration, but it wasn't until Kim was getting ready to leave that she made her move. We were standing in the doorway and then they shared a kiss, she says. I think that next weekend I came back to DC. We spent the entire weekend together and we've been together ever since. So this is another picture of the couple. And yeah, so that's just a little bit of background of how they met and became romantically involved. I actually saw this story posted on an Instagram account that's led by members of Black Greek fraternities and sororities, and basically all of the comments were in support. I think there were some naysayers, but I mention that because I'm seeing a trend among those who are part of these organizations. They typically side in favor of affirming same sex relationships, yet also many of them, like when I've done videos saying, hey, I don't think these organizations are rooted in Christianity, nor do I think that they are compatible with Christianity. A lot of people will say, no, we are completely compatible with Christianity. But most of them affirm things that go totally against what the Bible says, like natural marriage. And this is actually starting to become an issue in the organizations, as we're about to find out. So some of these LGBT issues are starting to spill over into like legal matters for these organizations. For instance, there has been some backlash that Alpha Phi Alpha encountered because of their stance on whether or not biological women can join their organization. So let's take a look at what they have encountered thus far when it comes to this LGBTQ plus issue. All right, here's an article I found on GLAAD. It says Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity considers transgender ban. So this is from July 15, 2024, which was published. This was published even before the AKA and the Delta got married, because that was in August of 2024. But anyway, I digress. Okay. It says, following a tense debate, delegates at the Constitutional Convention overwhelmingly voted to pass a proposed bylaw change that would ban trans members, according to sources. The amendment now proceeds to another voting and approval stage by individual chapters and the general body before being officially adopted. Additionally, following the publication of the report on Alpha Phi Alpha, an anonymous member of the Phi Beta Sigma told GLAAD that their fraternity already has a trans ban on the book. So the Sigmas already are like, no, biological women cannot join the organization. Okay. So they already have a trans ban on the books, meaning Alpha Phi Alpha is not the first Black Greek letter fraternity to consider such a proposal, as previously reported. A screenshot of the Sigma Constitution and bylaws verified by GLAAD states Phi Beta Sigma fraternity is an exclusively male organization. Its membership is limited to natural-born males who identify as such. According to the source, this clause was approved in 2017. So they saw this coming several years ago, after the organization accepted its first transgender member a year earlier. Okay, so this kind of was a little bit of damage control. That individual's membership was reportedly later rescinded. Oh, so they took it away. Okay. All right, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity could become the second Black Greek letter fraternity to ban transgender members. During its constitutional convention, which began July 10th in Chicago, so that's the same place that the AK and the Delta got married. Okay, July 10th in Chicago, delegates of the storied Organization for African American Men will consider an amendment to their bylaws that would restrict membership to any male defined as a human being naturally born male who remains and continually identifies as a male, according to a draft reviewed by GLAAD. Some members of the org say the proposed language is not only discriminatory and unnecessarily exclusionary, but politically motivated. They say the organization's national leadership and this amendment don't reflect a broader alpha membership that can be more accepting and welcoming. Their decision to alienate trans and non-binary people from membership is reactionary, asinine, and unbecoming of an organization with a professed commitment to human rights, says Deandra Miles Hercules, a self-described gender creative alpha who uses they them pronouns and likely would be impacted by the proposed bylaw amendment. It's ludicrous to be the fraternity of Thurgood Marshall and Martin Luther King Jr. and come up with a policy that bans trans people. Noting that many alpha men were central to the march to racial desegregation in the civil rights era, Shaw also questions how an organization with this legacy could consider a policy such as the proposed ban. Entities with similar historical and communal significance, like the NAACP, for example, have expressly affirmed their support of LGBTQ plus communities. What they've understood is what I understand, that the logic of civil rights has got to remain inviolate. Now, this continues to go on for a little while, but I think you can kind of get the picture that it seems like A5A has gotten itself into some hot water because they're standing on the thought that fraternities should remain organizations that are specifically for biological men. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this proposed ban, but I think even if the ban goes through, depending on, the next generation of leadership, if they make it that far, I'm not sure that this ban is going to really last very long. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But if the ban is eventually lifted, and I have a sneaking suspicion that it probably eventually will be if things continue to go in the direction that they're going, that this is definitely going to have a huge impact on the organizations, because if you ignore gender or you say it's something that you can't really define, how are you going to have a fraternity and a sorority? I mean, even that language at some point would become offensive to those who are proponents of transgender ideology. So that's why I personally think that because they continue to support the LGBTQ plus community, I feel like they feel pressured to, because of a lot of these political things going on. But if they continue to support this or turn a blind eye to it, it appears as though the T of the LGBT is going to completely take over. And then at some point, I think people are going to be like, you know what, man, like I'm not really in a group of just men or just women anymore. It's about to be co-ed, but really, I don't even know if co-ed is the right definition. But I don't think it's going to feel as authentic to them, because we all know, like, men and women are different. We think differently. Of course, we share a lot of commonalities, but we are biologically different and we have different perspectives. And that is because God created us differently. Men and women are distinctly different. And that is a blessing that's not a curse, and it's not a figment of our imaginations. That's right. Now, I know that this is a touchy subject, because again, we all have friends, loved ones, coworkers, people at our churches, maybe even, who are in this lifestyle, who maybe are struggling with their own gender identity. So it can be tough to deal with these conversations, because if you're Christian, you want to be honest with your loved ones, but you also want to make sure that they don't believe that you don't love them anymore just because you don't agree with their ideas. So I think a helpful thing to do is to understand where they're coming from, understand their perspective, maybe ask them questions about how they came to some of the conclusions they came to, maybe some of their experience in life that led them into the LGBTQ plus movement. And I think it's also good to listen to other Christians who are dealing with these kind of issues and have put out content to help you have conversations about it. So one of the things I'm going to do now is play this clip from Frank Turek that I think is especially helpful. He went to a church and someone asked a question about, transgender ideology, and I loved his response. So let's just take a look at that.
What are the main arguments to saying as a Christian that homosexuality and transgenderism is right or wrong? If you read through the Bible is a book built on man-women relationships. It's built on procreation. And obviously, when you have relationships that either don't do that or do that in a way that can bring a lot of pain and suffering, whether it's polygamy, whether it's adultery, whether it's fornication, the Bible is going to come out against that, because it goes against the purpose as to why we're here. From a natural law perspective, when you look at the man and the women together, obviously man and women are put together to procreate.
I wanted to stop here because I think you made a good point about it not just being about same-sex relationships being wrong. Fornication is wrong. Adultery is wrong. There's a lot of different ways that God says, hey, Christians or people in general are not supposed to do this with our bodies. We're not supposed to seek out these kind of relationships. So I appreciate him pointing that out. So let's continue.
The only thing a man and a woman can't do alone is procreate. We need one another in order to procreate. So the Bible and even natural law points to the fact that nature points to the fact that the man-woman relationship is the ideal. One quick thing about transgenderism, if we could. This, again, is a very sensitive issue. But I think that if you really think about it, transgenderism presupposes fixed genders. Why? Because if I'm a man biologically, but I think I'm a woman mentally, then I have to have some idea of what a man is and some idea of what a woman is to know there's a difference, to know there's a mismatch. And I also have to have some idea of what a man is and some idea of what a woman is to want to make the so-called transition.
Another great point, because if you are saying that gender is just something that you can't really define, then how are you going to say, well, I am this or I am that? You've got to have a standard to define what that thing is that you're saying that you are supposed to be.
Because if gender is completely fluid, transgenderism would make no sense at all. Do you see the point? And one of the issues in the LGBTQ community right now is there's a bit of an eternal war going on between the L, the G, the B, and the T. Why? Because if the T has its way, if the T's have their way, there are no genders, then the L, the G, and the B don't exist. Because how can you be gay, lesbian, or bisexual if there are no genders?
Yeah, so I think this is the same problem that I'm trying to highlight within Greek life and its relationship with the LGBTQ plus community. So I think the LGBTQ plus is going to ultimately be a detriment to those organizations, and it seems like adding the T to the LGB is really kind of erasing the LGB because it ignores gender, solidified gender. Again, if there's no female, then you can't have a lesbian relationship because there's no such thing. You can't have gay relationships if there's no such thing as male. So, yeah, another great point.
That presupposes genders. In fact, even the feminists are concerned about this. Why? Because if there are no genders, there are no women. And if there are no women, there are no women's rights, which is why J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, is sticking to her position that if you're going to say gender is fluid, you just ruled women out of existence, and she won't stand for that. Guess what? She's right.
Now, things have got to be it's getting real out here if you have non-Christians who are saying, okay, this is getting a little bit out of control. And I like that he's highlighting what J.K. Rowling seems to have realized, that if this LGBTQ plus movement continues, or I guess in this instance, the trans movement continues to progress, the implications are, okay, women don't have rights anymore. Like women, we need our rights, okay? In modern history, women have had it a lot better than they have had it in ancient history. And we ain't trying to go backwards, you know what I mean?
That's right.
If you look at this logically, not emotionally, there are a lot of issues. In fact, Dr. Paul McHugh from Johns Hopkins University, he's a psychiatrist, likened transgenderism to anorexia. He says if there's a mismatch between your mind and your body, which is what happens in gender dysphoria, and what also happens in anorexia, we don't try and affirm the person's psychological state. We tell them that their psychological state doesn't align with reality. We try and fix them psychologically. We don't try and fix them with surgery. We would never say to an anorexic, you're right, you're overweight, let me give you liposuction. We would say, no, that would be harmful. If there is a mismatch between your mind and your body, you fix that problem with psychiatry. You don't fix a mental issue with surgery. Yet that is what many in our culture want to do.
Oh, I love that. I think that comparing the trans logic to what's going on with those who struggle with anorexia is a really good kind of comparison because, if someone weighs 50 pounds, but they are convinced that they need liposuction, the solution to that would not be to give them liposuction. And if you love someone who has anorexia, you would not want them to do something that would cause them further physical harm, psychological harm, something that could, just make the problem way worse than it already is. And so the same should go for those in our lives who we care about that are struggling with gender dysphoria. So yeah, I just think that was really good argumentation. And he actually wrote a book about this called Correct, Not Politically Correct. And y'all, the book is really good, is really helpful, again, to help you have conversations with people in your circles who are LGBTQ plus. And the book was extremely controversial. He talks about often how once he put that book out, it cost him 2 jobs at Fortune 500 companies.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
Because someone at the company found out that he had written this book. Had nothing to do with his job. He never mentioned the book. He never shared his faith while he was doing his job, but someone found it and he lost that job. So sad, people talk about being open-minded and being tolerant, but the groups that are preaching tolerance a lot of times just aren't very tolerant. So therein lies one problem. But definitely, if you want to learn more about how to talk to your friends about the LGBTQ and Christianity and how to share your faith with them and have good conversations, not screaming matches and all that, definitely look into that book because, actions have consequences. And if you have someone who is not only identifying as transgender, but is seeking to either get on hormones or have surgery, especially if you're talking about underage children, the side effects, the consequences of those surgeries are horrific, terrible, horrific. But even if they're not transgender, if they are just LGB, There's also a lot of health risks that are associated with that lifestyle as well. I've done a video on it and I referenced his book, Correct Not Politically Correct, in that video as well. But before I let you guys go, I did want to point y'all to an article that you can read that Frank wrote, and it's up on his website. Definitely check this out. You can go to crossexamine.org to read the whole thing, but it just lists 5 flaws of the transgender ideology that I think are super helpful, that that you can memorize and just kind of bring up in your conversations. Okay, so the name of the article is 5 Fatal Flaws in Transgender Ideology. Okay, the first one, and he mentioned some of these in the video. He says the design of the body proves there are only 2 genders. Number 2, transgenderism must presuppose fixed genders. Number 3, you can change your mind but not your biology. This, I think, is my favorite argument that he brings up. So definitely look into that paragraph on that one. Sex is not assigned at birth, it's discovered. And the last one is there is no basis for transgender rights. And I love this one. Actually, I'm going to read this paragraph. It says, we seem to be inventing new rights in America every 10 minutes. But where do rights come from? They can't come from the government, because a right is something you have regardless of what anyone else says about it, including your government. Rights can only come from God, our creator, as the Declaration of Independence puts it. Without God, every moral issue is reduced to a matter of opinion, because there's no moral standard if God doesn't exist. Everyone is just having their own opinion about it. Okay, what evidence do we have that God wants anyone to amputate perfectly healthy sex organs? There's none from natural law, the Bible, or any other supposed revelation that claims to come from God. People can demand that their government legislate or declare certain behaviors as rights, but that doesn't make them rights any more than the government can legislate that a biological man is a woman. That doesn't make him a woman. Instead of trying to change reality to fit our thoughts, we should be trying to change our thoughts to fit reality. As I document in the new 3rd edition of Correct Not Politically Correct, from which this column is adapted, there are several more fatal flaws in trans ideology, including the evidence showing that transitioning doesn't fix the underlying problem. But that's for the next column. So y'all definitely look into this if you want more explanation as to, why he has his different opinions on this topic in general. Again, I know this is a touchy subject and we don't always like to get into the weeds of this stuff, but it's super important. So y'all make sure you learn as much as you can about this issue. If you've got people in your life who you want to reach, pray, read, and be nice to people. You know what I'm saying? Even people who don't see the world the same way that you do. But a conversation can go a long way. So if y'all like this video and it was helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support what I'm doing here, please consider becoming a channel member, because you can help me to put out more videos. So anyways, love you guys, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.